Welcome back, CSE 3200 Yukon Stores. We're in video 4 of chapter 9, and we are going to create the .kt file. It's going to be associated with this one, and that's going to be CrimeDetailFragment. Okay, so we are going to come over here and right-click on your package name, new, Kotlin class file, crime detail fragment. Now, just because I said fragment in the name does not mean that this thing is a fragment or a child of the fragment class. That's done like this. Now, I did not tab and autocomplete. So in the cases where I do that, I've got to hover, import that class, and Android X fragment, yup, okay. So one of the first things we're going to do is we are going to make a crime, and we're going to use the late init technique that we have done before. So inside the class, not at this level here, private late init var, and we're going to call our crime with a lower case. It should understand what an uppercase crime is because we have it in the same file system, and it's not private or anything, so that seems fine. All right, now we're going to note that whenever we created this class, and this happened when we did robot purchase, and at least inside of an existing project that we had, chapters 2 through 4, we don't get an onCreate. Now we're going to override onCreate, and this is not an activity. It's a fragment, but a fragment has a very similar life cycle. So override fun onCreate, and just like in an activity, the first line has got to be super, and then use the whatever arguments might have been necessary, which onCreate is the only one that had an argument. So we're going to create, well, we already did create a crime, sort of. It's currently null, and we promised that whenever we use it, it won't be null. And what we're going to do is we're going to create that crime here. Now, this is very, very temporary. This is just to get the skeleton of our program working, get through chapter 9, get through chapter 10, find some way to get from the list to the detail, and then once we can start creating more dynamic crimes and we bring in data, then this stuff that we're about to put here, it will be gone. Crime is equal to, and then we're going to call our crime constructor, and our crime constructor has 3 arguments. Our first one is a UUID, so we're going to set our ID equal to UUID dot random UUID pren. The title, well, it's generic. We can put whatever we want here, but for now we'll put nothing. The date is going to be a call to a date object. Well, I forgot to hit tab like I did when I created the crime class, and so I've got to hover, import, and just like there, it should give me 2 choices. Didn't appear to give me any choices. All right, so I click twice, Alt-Shift-Enter for more options. No, it's not doing it. I'll come back to it. Is solved is equal to false. All right, so how can I fix this? Well, I could just do this, and now I get the import. Other ways I could have fixed that, I could have gone to the other file and saw that the import was java.util.date. That would be my crime file. That would have worked. Okay. Now, a couple of videos ago, when we set up our class, one of the first things we did is we went into the Gradle and we set up view binding. So that means that the way we do binding is going to be different now than it was chapters 1 through 7. But we will have a similar line of code up here, private latenit var. We're going to call our binding lowercase binding, and it's of type. And you're going to start typing fragment crime, and notice that it has a suggestion for us. Fragment crime detail binding. Now, if we did not have view binding in there, it would not have that as an option. But now that we have that in there, it knows that we are going to try and associate this with the activity that has those words in it. Let me see. Fragment crime detail, fragment crime detail. So if this thing was named something completely different, then my that suggestion would have been different. So I did say that with view binding, it's going to be different than it was before. And now it doesn't look too much different. In both cases, we use private late init. But this is going to be for binding everything. Before, if we had a button and a checkbox, we would have to have a late init for the button, a late init for the checkbox, and then use find view by ID for each of them, set the listeners for each of them. Here, it's the binding where I give a late init, and I can create those two widgets on the fly and get references to them a little bit more efficiently. Okay, so this is the end of my onCreate. And I'm not going to do anything else more with it. In fact, I've probably already done too much. With fragments, unlike with activities, we don't do all that much in onCreate. It basically is going to initialize things that need to be initialized before the view is made. And that's going to be done a completely different way in the future. And so, like I said, this part right here is temporary, so that'll just go out. And that means that by the time our project ends in a couple of months, this just might just not even be there at all, because it doesn't need to have been coded there. It was not given to us by default, so we could end up commenting the whole thing out in the future, and that would work. But that's for a later time. Override fun on create view. Okay, I hit tab in on create view. This is completely different. Fragment lifecycle is a lot like the activity lifecycle, but it does have some extra methods. It has on create view, and on view created all in the same level to get me from non-existent to created. Okay, so instead of just the one method like in activities, it goes through all three. And these three different methods, they have different responsibilities, and you need to know what they are. For the onCreate, typically this wouldn't be there, and it just gets me to the onCreate view. But should there be some very lightweight information that I need to have instantiated before the view is instantiated, then I would do that here. So onCreate view, its only responsibility is to inflate the view. And almost all of that is done with the default code that I got whenever I tabbed. So it comes with something that is a layout inflator, a container, and a saved instance state. Okay, and then it's going to make a call to them. Now, we do have some changes to make here, but not until here. So we're going to delete that, and we're going to put in binding is equal to, and then use our binding, fragment crime detail binding, to do the inflation for us. So in a call to inflate, we've got some arguments. The first one up is layout inflator. Now, I believe I've chosen to maybe to tab or to call layout inflator there, and it worked, but this also works. Layout inflator from the get layout inflator call. Okay, so I've seen that about 2 or 3 times now where it feels like I'm not sure why this works, and it's just something inherent. This one in view binding, which has a function that I'm calling with the word that I put here. All right, next argument is going to be our container, which is called container. And then our next argument is a Boolean, which just says we're not going to automatically inflate that. The inflation actually will come in the third of these methods, which is on view created. I just typed this line in and realized I was still on pause. But we did have one more line to put in. We need to return that binding by calling return binding.root. Okay, so now my view is inflated. And now everything that's associated with the view is going to be in on view created, or all the logic that's associated with it, which if you remember wiring up previously, we got references to inflated views, and then we set up the listeners. Okay, we've got our references to inflated views all with this binding and then a later call to that binding. Override fun on view created and now all of our logic needs to come within a function that's called binding.apply. So in between these curly braces, and whenever I am coding, talking, and I come back, I often forget, and I put it outside that binding.apply, and hopefully I realize why things are underlined in red. Okay, so we've got 3 things that we want to set listeners for, and they are the crime title, the crime solved, and the crime date. I've read those kind of out of order. Our crime date, we actually don't do much with for a very long time. But crime title and crime solved, we're going to deal with them pretty well right now. So crime title dot do on text changed. And then inside the parentheses, well, actually, we're going to get rid of the parentheses, and we're going to put in curly braces for the lambda. We're going to have our text, and then an underscore, and an underscore between commas. And I'm not sure if we've seen this before. I may have shown it once. I don't remember if I've shown it at this point. But in Kotlin, if you're not going to ever make use of necessary parameters for a function, then you can go ahead and replace those with an underscore. And that just saves a little bit of the processing power, because it's going to have a little bit of saving in the memory for the namespaces. So underscore there, because we're not going to use it. Crime is equal to crime.copy, and in parentheses, title is equal to, take the text that I currently see inside of that widget and make sure you turn it into a string. Okay, so this comes back to what I had said in another video when I made the crime class, that everything was a val, and whenever I make a change to it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of it and then set those changes. So we're going to see very similar logic in whenever we change the is solved, which deals with a Boolean. And that's the one where you probably would have thought, well, why is that val instead of var? So it kind of works the same way. That dot copy is working kind of like immutable strings. Let's make a copy of this. Let's add whatever the changes are. Now forget about the old version. All right, stay within the binding.apply, which ends right there. I remembered this time. Crime date dot apply text is equal to lowercase crime dot date dot toString. Something similar to what I saw up here. And then is enabled is false. And that's just going to make our button grayed out. Hopefully this will run in another video and we can see that. I'm not so sure. No, we wouldn't see that in a preview because that preview is in another file. All right. Last one, crime solved. Dot set on checked change listener. It has as parameters, well, something and is checked. Now, if you want to know what that something is, you could hover to find out. Basically, a button, a compound button. So, kind of like this, but I'm not going to reference it, so I don't need it. Crime is equal to crime.copy. And in parentheses, is solved is equal to is checked. Okay, this class is done. So key takeaways here, that to get from non-existent to created in a fragment, there's a difference. It's not just the one method, the onCreate. OnCreate will then go to onCreateView. OnCreateView will go to onViewCreated. It goes in that order. The responsibility here basically is just to pass to onCreateView. Okay, but we do have an extra responsibility right now of we're instantiating something that is not related to the view, which happens down here. Okay. So basically just pass along to onCreateView, but instantiate something that is not related to the view. This just inflates the view. That's all I ever want you to do with this. And almost all of this is default code whenever you hit tab. We only started changing it on this line. So remember what's going on this line and that we had to call return binding.root. Now the responsibility on view created is to basically set the listeners for all of those widgets that we have inside of the view. We had a edit text, which we're just going to make a copy and set the title equal to whatever was currently in that box. And a button, which we're saying is going to be gray. You can't press it. Pressing it does nothing, but we'll see the string. And the checkbox, which sets itself to it's solved, whether it's checked or not. All right, one more video. And that's going to just get everything working. I'll see you in that video.